Ha, there we go. Sorry for boomering that up. Things are a little bit crazy today. I do apologize for the. Uh, I do apologize for not giving anyone time to plan for this stream. I wasn't planning for it myself, but time got away from me, and between painting, packing, and everything else I have to do for my move, you guys are going to get a review like this. I'm going to be pretty quick about it because, well, this book was pretty quick and confusing and weird. So it's not. So this week I'm reviewing Annihilation, the Southern Reach Trilogy, Book One by Jeff Vandermeer. This, I was recommended this book. It's probably one of the weirder ones I've read, but it's not Model Land weird. This is SCP almost trying to touch on Cthulhu type weird. So I'm going to set the scene for you by giving you a little bit of a recap. And if you're watching this in the future, if you're watching this now, you can go to my Twitter page or my YouTube page, and you will see that I have an art contest going on right now for pinups. If you would like to participate in the contest, the prize is one of three $200 commissions. I reserve the right to increase that number. Really, to enter, all you have to do is draw a simple pinup. You don't have to go wild, but you are welcome to do so. I will also ask you to link your portfolio. That way I can judge you not just on an impromptu drawing, but on the other art that you've done. As I said, the prize is one of three $200 commissions, and the contest is going on until December 15th. Welcome, Golnath, or welcome, Monty. I'm going to do this about as quick as I can. I'm not sure if you mean what you mean by the shimmer. Today I'm reviewing Annihilation, and I want to give a bit of a recap for those who may not have read it. Yes, it's by Jeff Vandermeer. So we start with a large amount of storytelling here from the biologist. They're going on an expedition into Area X, and the biologist is excited because there's a lot of different clashing biomes here. If you're familiar with Minecraft, that's pretty much what I was picturing, but with real live animals and less squares. So she's joined on her team by a surveyor, an anthropologist, a linguist, and they are led by a psychologist, which is a weird thing to have leading anything, really. Howdy, welcome to the stream. I'm reviewing Annihilation, or at least as best as I can. So our main character, the biologist, after going on a bit of a screed about the different animals, the different wildlife, and how the biomes clash with each other, gives us a little bit about basically the expedition. That this is, I believe, the 12th expedition, that the 11th expedition was kind of auspicious. Usually it seems that people don't come back from these expeditions, but the 11th came back. But they weren't exactly the same, and they all died from a similar mysterious illness. I'm not sure if it was cancer. I'm pretty sure it was. I feel like this book was a little bit rambly, but let's continue. So they reach their base camp, and it turns out they're not allowed to bring in anything modern, including compasses, which aren't very modern, but okay. They can't bring cell phones. They have to use old antiquated guns. It doesn't really cover why at this point. I think it covers it maybe a little later, and they're all wearing these little squares that have a little dot on them, and that if they glow red, it means they have to get the heck out of there because things are about to go horrible. Then they reach the tower, or the hole. The main character sees it as a tower, even though it's not that high off the ground, but it descends into the ground. I think what she was getting at is it looks like a tower that was buried. But they're all encouraged to discuss how things make them feel. Was it cancer? I think it might have been cancer. I'm not sure, Grumble. It very well could have been cancer. It was very odd. But anyway, they get to this tower, and they're all talking about the weird things that they're experiencing and feeling because they're encouraged by the psychologist who's leading the expedition, which is, again, another reason why I don't think you would have a psychologist lead an expedition. But they're recording their feelings and they're also not allowed to refer to each other by their names. I don't even think they're allowed to know each other's names or use their names. So they simply refer to each other by their job titles. It's very austere. Oh, yes, it definitely makes sense. So they're all encouraged to write their little journal. Yes, cosmic cancer. They're all encouraged to write their journals, and everything's kind of odd and weird around them. You get this kind of fever dream feel from the very beginning of the book. But when we reached the towers, I was actually reminded of the show Made in Abyss. And at that point, I was expecting things to get really weird and really, well, let's just call it nightmare fuel. But to this point, the whole thing is read like a psychological experiment. And this is further, let's say, cemented by the fact that they all had to be hypnotized before they went in there. They don't remember arriving there. And the main character talks about looking back and everything was just kind of a blurry haze, which led me to believe, at least at the beginning, that maybe they're all dreaming. Made in Abyss is actually pretty good, but it's also undeniably Japanesey. Like, it's creepy, but it feels like it's a kid show. It lures you in with cuteness and then it just hits you over the head with horror. Honestly, the worst father of the year is definitely in that story. I advise you go watch that. Anyway, back to the story that we're currently in. So it turns out that the linguist who was originally part of their party was kicked out at the beginning, leaving their party with only 4 people: the psychologist, the biologist, who's the main character, the surveyor, who was from the army, and the anthropologist, who's kind of flighty. So they're getting ready to go to bed that night when some giant creature starts burbling, burping, making some kind of weird loud moaning noise from the swamps nearby. And they all take that as a reason to go to sleep. The next day, they decide that they're going to explore the tower. I'm going to shorten that whole exchange because there's a lot of argument about what they should do and where they should go and what they shouldn't do. They all decide to go to the tower. We're going to be decisive about this. So they reach the first level and they find a type of fungus script. And by that, I mean there are words written on the wall in fungus. And there's some really unnerving words too. I have them written down here. I believe it was those of the where lies the strangling fruit begins this. And I will officially say I'm not eating any fruit that's going to strangle me. The book unofficially takes place at St. Mark's National Wildlife Refuge. I There are parts I like about the book, Monty, but I think I kept expecting it to be something else. I can't say I dislike it, but even now, because I just finished it last night, it was oh, so it takes in place in Florida, so that makes perfect sense. Gotcha. So anyway, they descend into the tunnel and they're reading the fungus flowers, and this actually was an interesting little tidbit. I probably would have made a similar mistake to what the main character did because she got a little too close and got a face full of spores. And for a flash, the tower goes from being made of shell and concrete to being made of flesh. And I'm like, oh, good. This is starting to get real psychological horror. I'm liking this right here. You like the book and the fungi. It was an interesting little flash. Let's just call it that. It's not a very big book. It's certainly worth a read. Well, they have to call it a day because they decide they're going to explore a little bit further down later. And the main character is a little freaked out because she's not sure what this fungus is going to do to her. And she keeps waiting for the changes to come. Honestly, throughout the whole book, I felt she was a little bit disconnected, and that theme kind of continues through the rest. The anthropologist wants to, if I remember correctly, the anthropologist wanted to leave, but the others wanted to stay and explore the tower a little bit more. Even though the others still continue to call it a tunnel, I would be inclined to agree with the others that it was a tunnel, but I could get where she's coming from that it might have been a tower. Well, they wake up the next morning, and it turns out the anthropologist left, and the psychologist tells them all to, we're going to go, the psychologist tells them we're all going to go explore this tower again. But something weird happens this time. The biologist notices that the psychologist is giving her some kind of weird hypnotic commands. And she notices that the surveyor starts acting weird at these commands. And she also notices that this isn't something that's happening to her. And this is about the point I started to think, is this going to be a trauma of what humans can do to each other kind of psychological horror? It was kind of nice that she was disconnected, but I'll get more into that a little bit later. So they go exploring the tower a bit more, and the psychologist says she's going to stand guard. So the surveyor and the biologist start going further down, and the further down they go, the less sense this long sentence, which just disappears into the darkness, continues to make. And they're recording it, but they just can't see. While the words are functional, the sentences are functional, they don't seem to make sense. There was actually a chatbot that this reminded me of years and years ago that took all the rules of grammar and started making sentences with it. And the sentences were a little bit of madness, but they made perfect, coherent sense, and they were almost poetic. And I'm wondering if they used something similar to make these. But it's getting kind of creepy, and they continue traveling down, and it seems that the words are getting fresher, like they're just recently written. And the surveyor wants to leave, but the biologist wants to continue down to one more floor. And after having a chat at the end of a gun, they decide to go one more floor, and then they're going to turn around. And when they get to the bottom, they find a corpse. The corpse of the anthropologist. Because it's going to be that kind of story. So I want to cover my dislikes first, because there were some things that I really liked about this book. But I really want to cover the dislikes first. First of all, the longer the book went on, the more psychopathic I thought the main character was. And I couldn't tell if that was because of the spores or just because she was, well, psycho. She spends a lot of time in the book, especially in later chapters, talking about her relationship with her husband, who was on the previous expedition. And their relationship feels very one-sided. That her husband loves her far more than she loves him. At least that's the impression that I got. That she finds him interesting in a anthropological sort of way, in a she's studying him kind of way. And even when she talks about the sex that they have and the relationships they have, it feels more like she's just kind of drug along. Like he's just intriguing enough that she kind of continues on with him. She was very awful to her husband. But even when he comes back, she talks about, she has a lot of flashbacks. It's one of the reasons I did my little screed on the flashbacks, is because there was a lot of flashbacks in this book. And that was one of my biggest issues with it. But when the husband comes back, she talks about all the things she loved about him are gone, like he's just some kind of puppet. And even, she drags him around trying to get a response out of him. Their relationship was probably one of my least favorite parts of the book, because I couldn't figure out if she loved him or if it was some kind of psychopathic distant relationship, or if they just found each other really intriguing. I think he loved him more too, but I like at the end how she realized she should have let him in more. She probably should have, but I think it was just that these were two really weird people who just happened to find each other, and just like, hey, we're the weirdest people around. We find each other much more interesting than everybody else, so we'll just stick together. But the relationship with the husband were definitely the worst part of this book. That being said, the flashbacks. There's a flashback almost every chapter. Now, there's only 5 chapters in this book, but the flashbacks just flitter in and out. It's almost like a stream of consciousness, but a very coherent stream of consciousness, a very educated stream of consciousness. I was having flashbacks to college where a professor was telling me a story. Like it's a lot like listening to a physics professor or an engineer tell you a story. It's very dry, very heavy on the details, on the weird little eccentricities that they notice, especially when she's talking about the swimming pool that got polluted. I don't think she's a psycho, but I think she might have something affecting her ability to empathize. I think it's more that she was a very neglected child, that her parents were very distant even when they were there. They didn't take a hand in raising her, they just kind of let her go about and she just learned things the best she could, which is something I can sympathize with, but it doesn't, I think, make a very good character. Sorry about that. Needed a drink. So I'm going to move. Basically, most of what I didn't like can be boiled down to the flashbacks and just the generally weird nature of the main character. She was very introverted, Grunbull. She's just very, very introverted. She's also got, I don't want to call her a Mary Sue because she's not, but things feel a little too convenient for her. Like she's able to kill somebody the first time she tries to shoot somebody against somebody who was militarily trained, who only wounded her, which that struck me as really, really odd. But let's get into what I like, because I really like cosmic horror. I really like dark and twisted things. I really like weirdness and body horror, weird stories like that, which is one of the reasons why I mentioned Made in Abyss, because this has some similar moments to it. So, and I'm just going to spoil things here because there's no way to talk about what I liked that's not going to spoil things. Basically, this land is changing people. It's turning people into all sorts of different animals and weird things. Like not quite what's normal. Like there's a part where the main character sees a dolphin and it looks at her, and for a moment, it's got a human eye. And I'm thinking that what basically happened to all the people in these expeditions, and I'm assuming this is what the book leads you to believe, is that they all became the various animals that are there. And even when she meets the thing writing, it turns out that that was once a human too. And it's like this weird other dimensional stuff that's just spreading out over the location. It has no real defined borders, but it's expanding and they're trying to figure it out. But it doesn't really conform to how humans work. I really do like the cosmic horror aspect of it. It's a lot of terror of not knowing. There's something weird going on and you can't tell. But honestly, I would have been much more interested if this had stuck to the psychological horror at the beginning of the book, where it was layers of hypnotism and the main character was breaking it and she was trying to convince the others, but they were under sway. And mixing that with some of the cosmic horror would have been a lot of fun. Like the psychologist had control, but there was weird things affecting it and it was causing all sorts of oddities, but it was fun for the weirdness that it was. That being said, some of the story was a little hard to follow. Like, I don't know how to properly phrase it. It would jump in and out of the main story and the action. I'm caught up on the door. I don't remember the door. My most vivid memories of this book are from when they were exploring the tower and where the main character goes to the lighthouse. The spores did help her. The spores actually made her immune to hypnotism. But it don't. Honestly, once she realized the spores helped her from saved her from hypnotism, she probably should have exposed the one with the gun to them. But about the door, I don't remember the door. It's the white light at the bottom of the tower. Okay, so I very vaguely remember something about that because she goes into this big long talk about this starfish called the Destroyer of Worlds, and then the thing that's writing all this stuff starts probing her mind and stripping out her identity, and then it just releases her and she's fine. So It was I would have liked a more coherent narrative, but that probably would have taken away from some of the horror aspects. I get the feeling that this person read a lot of Lovecraft and wanted to bring a more modern scientific view to Lovecraft. It's a very odd book. If you like weirdness, you're certainly going to like it, and it's not a very long book. But I can't bring myself to be properly disposed to it, I would say. Yeah, the color from outer space is definitely this definitely feels like the color from outer space. With the strong ocean themes and the weird biomes and the humans turning into animals, this is definitely Lovecraftian. But the thing is, even reading Lovecraft, it's not that scary. It's more the psychology of what you don't know. I can see why people would like this. I can definitely see why people would like this, but it was just the touches of horror were a bit too light for me. The touches of psychology were a bit too light for me. I would have liked it to be something evil in the old sense of evil, like it's something that's an anathema to you. It's an anathema to life. It's completely out there. Is the Into the Abyss anime manga pervy? I mean, it's Japanese, so is it pervy by American standards? Yes. Is it pervy by Japanese standards? No. So, and I don't want this to become a thing about Made in Abyss. If you like this book, you would probably like Made in Abyss, as long as you also like body horror and trauma, which is one of the things I was really hoping that this was going to have a little bit more of, a little bit of body horror and trauma, because that's the type of scary stuff that I like. So I it's hard for me to honestly recommend. No, you can go ahead. It's I don't have much else to say on the book. It's the exposition was a bit too heavy for me. The jumping around was a bit too heavy for me. If it stuck in the moment and the flashbacks were lighter, I would definitely have made this a 5 star. If we'd have had a bit more body horror where we found somebody like in the middle of it, or somebody who just couldn't accept it and they were like stuck halfway in the transformation and couldn't talk, or if we'd have seen a bit more of the transformation, I think that would have been a bit more fun for me. Do you think the sci-fi in this cosmic from space or something ancient from within the earth? That would have been fun to explore, actually, because the way it is, they don't know. But I think the fact that we don't know makes it more fun. It definitely needed more of it. It needed more structure to the story, I think. I think if we'd have had more narrative and more place for them to visit, it would have been a lot more fun. I like the flashbacks because, let's see, I like the flashbacks, but that's because they were biological science moments, and I love the natural world and 1 2 and M1 2. I could see that. She definitely covers a lot of biology, but I think it would have been a lot more fun if it had made her relive some of these moments rather than these just being things she pulls out of nowhere. Like maybe as this thing is probing her mind slowly, you get more information about her past and she gets to look at things a little more differently. Do you ever read less than 1,000 pages of indie a week? Uh, I read. I read when I get a chance. My new job gives me a lot more opportunity to do so. Once I'm done reading, I'm certain, or once I'm done with my move and I get set up at my new place, I'm definitely hoping to do some more. Hi, Herman. This is a trilogy, but I don't think the mystery of Area X is revealed, just more about the Southern Reach organization. Honestly, there shouldn't be more of X revealed. I think it should stay a mystery. With this kind of horror, I think it's best to build more mystery. And if you do reveal something, it should just reveal more questions or be more threatening. I As I've told you, it's a wonderful mall I work at. It's just none of you guys are allowed to go there. There's no kids there. I can promise you that. In fact, since I work nights there because I'm a night person, I like the night. It's certainly spooky. It was a lot of fun listening to this book and get myself all creeped up as the fog rolled in and I had to watch it through security cameras. That was really creepy. Uh Now, horror has never been a big genre for me, though I like horror and I don't read it because I'm up at night all the time and, I don't want to freak myself out too much. Try to keep my stress down, make sure I don't die of a heart attack. But I think we should have explored more of Area X or some of the weird stuff going on. She finds a cache of journals in here, and it would have been fun if we would have got a bit more about those. That would have been a good venture for us to find out more of the weird stuff that was going on and force her to relive what was going on with her husband. But I have to say, the flashbacks with her husband are still definitely the worst part of the book, at least for me. Uh, but I will have to say, as far as trad publishing goes, I appreciate that this was at least a coherent book. Oh my gosh, from some of the stuff that I've seen out there, at least it was coherent. At least you can follow what's going on. But it was. It would have been nice if they had broken up, even if they had done the flashbacks as a different chapter, or found some other way to bring them in than just her remembering or her about to go on this big long tirade about something that happened in her childhood or something that happened with her husband or the day her husband died, or even if it had just been kind of a B plot that had its own chapters. As it stands, we're just in the middle of something's happening and then it's cut to a flashback. What's this, John? Let's see here. It's one of those malls, and that's why the files talk about. You think you're just going to get an Orange Julius, a Sapporo pizza, and then wind up in the blank spaces somewhere. Uh, to let you know about the type of mall I work with, it's not actually a mall. Well, I'm a federal contractor for armed security now because I needed something to get me out of the stress of my old job. I was doing a lot of logistics, and it was basically killing me. So now I've gone into armed security, and it's so much nicer. It's so much less stressful to think somebody might roll up and try to shoot me than to work where I was trying to manage people and making sure things got where they needed to be. I can promise you that. But as far as the mall itself, you need security clearances to get there. So there's a part in the journal, or there's a part with the journals where she gets in the lighthouse and she finds all these journals from the past expeditions. And she's reading a few of them, and she eventually finds her husband's. And she's a little bit torn up about it because this is the last thing she's going to see about her husband. This is the last bit of information she's ever going to get on him. These are the last words she's ever going to hear that are the true him. And he talks about how he's going to go to a certain spot, but he eventually does show back up again. He shows back up at her home, but he's not the same person. So we're thinking maybe there's something of him left in this space. What are you talking about here? How many Pfizer shots do you take a week for them to so I'm a contractor of a contractor, so I do not have to get the Pfizer shots. And given some of, let's just say my medical history is not one where I can just go getting random shots willy nilly. I've got some. It's nothing that keeps me from running or working out, but there's some complications when it comes to stuff like that, which keeps me from having to get anything like that. See, that would have been cool, as I wanted to see her read through them a bit more. That would have been cool. We could have seen some of the things they were fighting against because they converted the lighthouse into some kind of fortress and things were coming after them. And at the end of the book, they talk about this place is going to become a schism of violence again. So it would have been nice to see some violence between things that weren't the people there. It would have been a cool ending, and this is not the ending, if she had stayed in the lighthouse and acted as some kind of a chronicler, like going through all the journals and making sure it was all documented so the history of that place wasn't lost. What's that, Monty? I swear I forgot how much of this book, gang. So much of this book. The This book is not written in a way for you to pick out facts easily. I've got for most books of this size, I would take about a full page of notes. I've got about 3 for this book, and it's just trying to keep track of everything that's going on. I want what was that? I want to see the thing crying in the reeds. That would have been cool. That would have been a really cool part if we could have gotten some of the horror of the things that were out there, because it didn't sound like any animal. She just become Yes, but she becomes a librarian in a really weird space, and she has to survive. Honestly, by the end of the second to last chapter, the way she was going on, I thought she was literally just going to stay there for the rest of her life and read. That's what I thought she was going to do, because or stay there and research. Like, okay, everybody else is dead. So now I can just go play around with the wildlife and do all the research I want because they send all these resources. I can do it till I die. That's what I honestly thought, because that's the vibe she was giving off. That all she ever wanted to do was do her research and look at the weirdness of the different animals and how they worked and how they functioned and why this worked and why that functioned. And I'm not sure what a destroyer of worlds is when she's looking at that giant starfish, but it seemed like that it was really hard to track if that was just something that happened to her in her past and she almost landed on this, I'm assuming, extremely poisonous starfish, because you don't give it a name like the destroyer of worlds if it's not a very poisonous little monster. But yeah, it would have been a good ending if she's like, "Oh, everybody else is gone. Now I can just indulge in my weird research all that I want." That would have been a much more fitting end for this character, because I think she's got some real problems with people and just being part of the just disappearing into the wilderness to do the research for the rest of her life and read other people's notes. That would have been a fitting end for this character. As it stands, I'm not sure what happened to her. I'm assuming, like everybody else, she eventually turned into one of the bits of wildlife. So I imagine she becomes some smoke colored bird from where her husband calls her Ghost Bird. In the weird, this is the weird version of the Secret Garden, except there's less British people and less, comfort. Everything about this book, the narrator made me uncomfortable. Like, they're the type of person that has no idea how to be around other people, and so every room you're in with them is awkward. But then I don't think many people in this book were good people. Having been around a lot of very clinical people, like scientists and biologists, and just getting into that type of setting, people get really weird when they study into that too deeply. We had a professor at my college who he was a physics professor. He's one of the best. And he was so messed up by what he'd studied, he would leave his classroom and mutter to himself with his thumb pressed up against the wall as he walked so he wouldn't get lost. There's some things you study that just mess you up. Yes, that's. Oh, let's see. What's this? Google Destroyer of Worlds, and it's cool. And you're right, it's venomous. Yeah, I mean, so many things in the ocean are. And if you're going to call it the Destroyer of Worlds, it'd be weird if it wasn't poisonous. I mean, does it just like screw you up? Does it like jab you up or tear you to pieces? It's either something really big and really vicious, or it's something stupid poisonous. Oh, Lord. She seems rather comfortable with how she was. Yeah, she's comfortable with how she was. I was uncomfortable with her. Like, just being her. The narrator did a fantastic job. And actually, I think that she was the narrator for Shad's book. And I have to say, this was a much better thing to find her in because she plays the character very, very well. I felt very uncomfortable around this character because she seems like a remarkably uncomfortable person. And I don't mean like she herself is uncomfortable. I mean, her presence is an uncomfortable thing. And there's a lot of situations in the book I think could have been diffused if these people had been less, is the proper word autistic? I don't want to insult autistic people. I've been around a number of them that are far more comforting than the characters in this book. They they would not be fun at a dinner party, let's just put it that way. The poisonous things are always the prettiest too. Well, I've known some pretty toxic people who were remarkably colorful, and I will not grant them the boon of calling them pretty. Yes, I mean, if you eat it, it's still poison. You know, I mean, venomous, toxic, poisonous. If you eat it, if it sticks you, you're dead or really hurting. So it really doesn't matter. I mean, well, it kind of does. As authors and writers, we do have to know what different words mean and be very exact in our speech. But sometimes it's nice to be a little loose with words. It's hearing the same word over and over again gets very, very dull. I'm reminded of as if you've paid attention to my channel for any length of time, you'll know one of my weaknesses is light novels from Japan. And the Overlord series is very guilty of this. They had a localizer who didn't understand that English, you got to have a little bit of a choice for words. And so they use the term a puppet with its strings cut over and over and over again for any time somebody dies or falls over. And you need a bit of variation. And so synonyms are a great thing. And that's all I'm going to say on that topic because I've been putting a lot of time into this writer's technicals video I'm trying to release next week, and I'm hoping, praying I can get it done because it's going to be over an hour, and I still haven't gone through all my notes and made the script yet. It's only poison if it kills you. Otherwise, it's considered a delicacy. I mean, tobacco and marijuana both have neurotoxins in them that kills almost everything else but us. So, it's I guess be careful what you're toxic towards because you might get eaten for it. Poison only works so long as it can kill the thing. Or as I like to quote one of my favorite lore channels when he says, the battle for survival isn't done until the loser has successfully passed all the way through the victor's digestive tract without the painful passing of the victor. A puppet with its strings cut is a cool analogy, but only once in a book. Yes, he's I think I've read 10 books into that series, and I think I've seen it about 30 times. And I wish I spoke and read Japanese better. I know a little bit, but it would be nice to do some localizing because it would be a fun way to make money, but I don't think I'd make as much money as I'm currently making. My mama always says you should wash an orange frog real good before you eat his legs, unless the poison might stay. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say you probably shouldn't eat an orange frog, at least if it's orange before you cook it. You can eat anything once. I disagree with that, and I'm going to give you a perfect example. When I was young, we used to have gross stuff drinking contests, and I used to make the drinks for these because I was good at it. And there's a few things that I can promise you will not get one swallow on. And one of those is pure distilled white vinegar. If you are not prepared and you aren't ready, you aren't even going to get to eat it once. That's straight white vinegar. That's very, very hard to do. There's a trick to drinking very caustic things. Oh, that's not even the worst one. I have my weeding round where we'd have 4 or 5 people playing, and I needed to lower it down real quick. So my go-to for that would be half a glass of whole milk with a few spoonfuls of cottage cheese just mixed right in. And the thing is, the food is perfectly fine, but nobody can do it. So few people can get past that texture. And it's amazing if you could keep it simple how gross you could make things. Like building somebody a condiment sundae is one thing, but all the conflicting flavors is actually kind of a mask in and of itself. I see I have encouraged the culinary arts of the people I'm broadcasting to. We all thought it was orange because of the pool of rust water, and then started seeing carnival fairies. Yeah. I mean, in that case, if it doesn't kill you, I mean, it's just dinner with a show. uh, I can't fault people for being too weak. There's certain things I will never eat again. Raw oysters is certainly one of them. Yeah, Rainer, I'm going to tell you right now, there are some bugs you're definitely not going to want to eat. But well, where I live, there's a bunch of there are these things called helgramites, and they're really big bugs for being in such a temperate zone. I think we got one that was almost a foot long, and they'll freak you out if because they'll land on your screen and you think a rock hit it, and you look outside and there's this big old bug laying across your window. And you got to be careful where it depends on where you live. If you live near some stagnant water, they'll show up. So yes, they are about a foot long. I wish I had I'll have to practice with this. I could show you a picture. They get really, really big, and they got giant pinchers on them. So Grumble, why? I once drank a pint of milk and a pint of orange juice after. I'll never do that again. It's like, yes, because the citric acid curdled the milk in your stomach, didn't it? I remember making curry one time, and I was trying to make a creamy curry with a bit of orange juice to it. And the moment that orange juice goes in, it curdles directly. So that's why you have to use coconut milk. It's very, very important. Well, Grumble, in that case, one thing you should also never do is eat a bunch of bananas and then drink Sprite, because it'll have a different but similar effect. I think the sickest I've ever been was eating kimchi and orange juice. That was a really bad combination. I was very, very sick from that. Aside from the what's wrong, Monty? I don't. Oh, well, let's cover this real quick. So, part of the reason that wouldn't work is because a lot of the carbon comes out of the cola, because the body heat, or your body heat, is going to get all that carbon dioxide out of the liquid. The Mentos can only really work off of the carbon dioxide in there. So. Okay, what is that bug called? If you're talking about the bug I was mentioning earlier, it's called a helgramite. The babies are actually, before they become the big ones, they are, you can look it up, they're pretty big. But the larvae are really, really good for fishing. Like catfish love those things. I think trout like them a lot too. But they look like a combination of really big ant and stag beetle, I want to say. And they fly. I mean, like they're pretty much harmless, but they fly, and it's really freaky when you see them. Yes, Rainer, I do not doubt that you would eat one of those. Well, speaking of eating, I have to go check on my dinner. I appreciate you all being here with me in this book of rambling madness, where we got to talk about some of the horrifying things that we've eaten in the past. I mean, Monty, to be perfectly fair, if I missed, to be perfectly fair as far as food goes, I mean, we eat some pretty scary things in general. So, all right, folks, I'm going to end the stream there so I can go eat my dinner and continue packing. I'm hoping to have a video up for you guys next week if I'm not too busy packing and moving and getting settled into my new house, but I'll have my internet hopefully on Monday. So I should be able to, at most, I'm going to miss a week. So thank you all for showing up. I wish you all good luck. And John, you always have fun. Y'all have a great day.